5 years ago, one company was worth more than $360 billion, and it was, by broad agreement, the future of how money would move online. This morning, it is worth roughly a fifth of that, and the younger rival that helped pull it apart has just put $53 billion on the table to buy it outright. This is KnowFlo Daily. Good morning. It's Wednesday, July 15th. Here's what's on the front page. Inflation cooled off in June. Consumer prices were up 3.5% from a year earlier, the Bureau of Labor Statistics said Tuesday. That's down from 4.2% in May, which had been a 3-year high. And month to month, prices actually fell, 0.4% from May to June. That is the largest outright decline since 2020. Most of it came from tumbling oil. Retail gasoline topped $4.50 a gallon nationally in May and has since dropped back under $4. Core inflation, which strips out food and energy, was up 2.6% from a year earlier, down from 2.9% in May. On a monthly basis, core prices were flat. Grocery prices rose a modest 0.2%, and shelter inflation kept cooling. Good news, with one large caveat we'll come back to later in the show. Oil has shot back up in the last few days. The Food and Drug Administration says it is now investigating multiple produce items, including lettuce, trying to find the source of an unusually large parasitic outbreak. Labs have confirmed 1,645 cyclosporiasis cases across 34 states since May, with 141 hospitalizations and no deaths. And that's just the confirmed count. The Centers for Disease Control says it is aware of more than 5,100 additional reported cases that still need analysis. Michigan alone has reported over 3,300. Cyclosporiasis is a parasitic intestinal infection picked up from food or water contaminated with feces, usually raw fruits and vegetables. The country has had outbreaks before. The scale and the geographic spread of this one are what has officials concerned. The Washington Post reported that federal and state officials were investigating whether lettuce served at Taco Bell may be associated with it. The chain says it removed certain ingredients at select restaurants as a precaution, and that no link to the chain has been confirmed. Yum Brands shares fell as much as 4.5% on the report. For now, the FDA says there's no food it is telling people to avoid. Starting Monday, the administration began stopping American citizens who have been in the Democratic Republic of Congo from boarding commercial flights to the United States, unless they have first spent at least 21 days somewhere else. Sit with that for a second. American citizens placed on a do not board list to come home to their own country. It was done using Title 49 Transportation Authority, based on an updated order from Health and Human Services Secretary Robert F. Kennedy Jr. Non-citizens who'd been in the DRC were already barred. About 24 Americans who were set to fly home have been affected. The State Department says it will work with them through the waiting period, and the CDC will provide medical assessments. Many of the Americans there are working for nonprofits or on international business. The trigger is Ebola. The World Health Organization reports 1,963 confirmed cases in Congo and 719 confirmed deaths, and the concern is that it has now spread into the western part of the country, well beyond the east where it started. 2 American humanitarian workers have tested positive. One was transferred to Germany for care on July 14th. This is the Bundibugyo strain, for which there is no approved vaccine and no proven treatment. And in South Carolina, Governor Henry McMaster has appointed Darline Graham Nordone to serve out the remainder of her brother's Senate term. Senator Lindsey Graham died Saturday at 71. A medical examiner's preliminary findings pointed to an aortic dissection, a rupture in the main artery running from the heart. Nordone is the first woman ever chosen to represent South Carolina in the United States Senate. Her appointment restores Republicans to a 53-seat majority, and she serves until January 3rd. The family history here is worth a moment. Graham became Nordone's legal guardian when she was 13, after their parents died within 15 months of each other in the 1970s. He was 22. He enlisted in the Air Force and adopted her so she would qualify for his military benefits, then pushed her to finish high school and go to college. Speaking at the state capitol, she said Lindsey has always been there for her, and she will be there for him. A special Republican primary is set for August 11th to determine who's on the ballot in November. But we begin this morning with the biggest deal the payments business has seen in years. An unsolicited, $53 billion run at the company that wants to find the internet's checkout button. Here's what's on the table. Stripe, together with the private equity firm Advent International, has jointly offered to acquire PayPal for more than $53 billion. $60.50 a share, backed by roughly $50 billion in committed bank financing. Reuters reported the offer. That's about a 28% premium to where PayPal closed on July 14th. The bid went in earlier this month, following an initial approach back in April. PayPal has not responded yet. Under the proposed structure, Stripe and Advent would hold equal stakes, and, notably, keep the company intact rather than breaking it up. PayPal stock surged on the news, up somewhere between 11 and 14% in pre-market trading Wednesday. Now, here's why this one lands the way it does. PayPal was, for a long stretch, the default way to pay for something on the internet. At its 2021 peak, the company was worth more than $360 billion. The stock is down 84% from that high. It's off 19% this year and 35% over the past 12 months. And the company making the offer is one of the companies that did the damage. Stripe was founded by the Irish brothers John and Patrick Collison in 2010. It's privately held, most recently valued at $159 billion, up 70% in the past year alone, which means Stripe is worth roughly 3 times what it's offering to pay for PayPal. 15 years ago, one of these companies was a giant, and the other one was 2 brothers writing code. To be fair, PayPal has not been standing still. Enrique Lores became chief executive in March and has been running a turnaround, including splitting operations into 3 divisions in April, but the competition arrived from every direction at once. Stripe on the developer side, Apple Pay in your pocket, and a long tail of others underneath. There's a crypto thread running under all of this, too, and it may be the real point. PayPal launched its PYUSD stablecoin back in 2023. It reached a $4.2 billion market capitalization in February, then fell back to about $2.85 billion. Stripe, meanwhile, has offered stablecoin accounts globally since May of 2025, and its infrastructure platform, Bridge, received conditional approval in February to operate as a federally chartered national trust bank. That is a serious piece of financial plumbing to be holding, so think about what this combination would actually be. The 2 biggest independent payment networks under one roof, with a stablecoin business and a national trust bank charter attached to it. That's not just consolidation of a mature industry. That's a bet on where money itself is going. Again, PayPal hasn't said anything yet, and unsolicited offers get rejected all the time. But the financing is committed, the number is real, and a 28% premium on a stock that's fallen 84% from its high is the kind of thing shareholders tend to have loud opinions about. Now, the rest of the day's business. IBM just had its worst day in a generation. Shares fell as much as 25% on Tuesday after the company warned that second quarter earnings came in short. Adjusted earnings of $2.93 a share on revenue of $17.2 billion against analyst estimates of about $3.01 and $17.86 billion. To put that drop in context, it put IBM stock on track for its worst single-day decline since Black Monday in 1987. But the explanation is the interesting part. Chief Executive Arvind Krishna said that in late June, clients abruptly shifted capital spending towards servers, storage, and memory, rushing to lock in supply constrained infrastructure ahead of expected price increases. Money that was going to go to software went to hardware instead. Krishna said IBM had anticipated some supply chain impact, but did not expect the magnitude of the shift. Numerous large deals simply failed to close on the timelines the company expected, and that drove most of the shortfall. The weakness was concentrated in the mainframe business, the high-powered computers and software that run banks and airlines. IBM now forecasts revenue rising just 1% for the quarter, its weakest growth in more than a year. And this was not only an IBM problem. Other software stocks fell alongside it. The iShares Expanded Tech Software Sector Fund dropped more than 4% on the day. If corporate budgets really are being drained out of software and poured into AI hardware, that's not a bad quarter. That's a structural problem for a very large industry. One more detail from that call, worth noting. Krishna said businesses are prioritizing cybersecurity spending given recent breakthroughs in AI hacking abilities, and he specifically cited Anthropic's Mythos model, which can expose flaws in existing software and encryption systems. To the Gulf, where the United States has resumed military strikes against Iran and reinstated a naval blockade of Iranian ports after the ceasefire collapsed last week. American warplanes have struck hundreds of targets inside Iran over the past week, according to United States Central Command, and Iran has resumed attacks on ships in the Strait of Hormuz. The latest round of strikes, aimed at degrading the Iranian capabilities being used against commercial shipping, began at 3 p.m. Eastern on Tuesday. The naval blockade in the Gulf of Oman restarted an hour later. More than 50,000 American troops are deployed across the Middle East. The entire fight is over the Strait of Hormuz, the waterway that carried roughly a fifth of the world's oil shipments before the war started. Brent crude rose as high as $87 a barrel Tuesday after the president announced the blockade would resume. He had proposed charging a 20% fee on cargo moving through the strait in exchange for military protection, and then scrapped the plan. Industry experts did the math on it. Such a fee would have cost a fully laden large natural gas carrier roughly $17 million per shipment, and a very large crude carrier about $24 million at $60 oil. Logistics companies called the idea fundamentally wrong and illegal. As for why the ceasefire fell apart, it came down to who controls the strait. The deal was a memorandum of understanding signed about a month ago. It had Iran making arrangements for the safe passage of commercial vessels at no charge, but for 60 days only, and it specified that Iran would conduct dialogue with Oman to define who administers the strait after that. The two sides interpreted that language very differently. Two more numbers to hold on to. American oil reserves are now at their lowest level since 1983. And Iranian state media reported that its military attacked United States targets in Bahrain, which the Pentagon has not confirmed, which brings us to the part of that story that reaches your wallet. The president posted on Truth Social that the ceasefire is over, saying the United States had told Iran, in no uncertain terms, that the ceasefire is over. Tanker traffic through the strait has slowed significantly. As of July 13th, Brent crude sold for $78.31 a barrel, $1.08 lower than the day before, but about $7.24 higher than a year earlier. And here's the thing that has kept this from being much worse: China. Normally the world's largest oil importer, China slashed purchases this spring, cutting imports by almost a third compared with a year earlier, according to May customs data released by Beijing. That drop in demand is a big part of why prices didn't soar even higher during the worst of the disruption. The International Energy Agency now sees hints of renewed Chinese buying interest, procurement efforts, one-off tanker deliveries. As Karen Young, a senior research scholar at Columbia University's Center on Global Energy Policy, put it, where Chinese demand goes is the most important piece of the puzzle for oil prices. Then there's diesel, which is quietly the bigger story for anything that moves on a truck. Russia banned overseas diesel sales to preserve supplies at home after Ukrainian drone attacks severely damaged Russian refineries and limited the country's ability to turn crude into transportation fuel. Diesel averaged $4.88 a gallon on Monday, up 2.5% from a week earlier, according to AAA. And crack spreads, the margin refiners earned turning crude oil into gasoline, diesel, and jet fuel, climbed above $60 a barrel in the past week. That is one of the highest levels on record. So, June's inflation number was cooled by cheap oil. Oil is no longer cheap. Keep that in your pocket when the July number arrives. And now, for something completely different. A Tyrannosaurus Rex sold at Sotheby's in New York on Tuesday for $50,100,000. That is the most anyone has ever paid for a dinosaur fossil at auction. It went after a 10-minute bidding war involving 7 bidders. The buyer participated by phone and chose to remain anonymous. The previous record was $44.6 million, set by a Stegosaurus in 2024, bought by the billionaire hedge funder Ken Griffin. The specimen is nicknamed Gus, about 12.5 feet tall, roughly 38 feet long, 183 bones, and about 61% complete by bone count, according to Sotheby's. It dates back roughly 67 million years to the late Cretaceous, and it had a rough life: fractured and healed ribs, bite marks on parts of the skull and on other bones. Gus was discovered in 2021 on a cattle ranch in Hardin County, South Dakota. He is named for the ranch owner, Gary Licking, who died in 2022 during the excavation. Thomas Heitkamp and his team from Theropoda Expeditions spent 3 field seasons digging the fossil out, followed by years of lab work to clean it, document it, and assemble it. Not everyone is celebrating. The Society of Vertebrate Paleontology cautioned before the sale that private purchases may permanently diminish opportunities for future research, education, and public engagement. $50 million is well past what any museum in the world can bid, and that's the tension in a booming collectibles market. It is very good at getting these fossils out of the ground, and increasingly good at putting them somewhere no scientist will ever see them again. And quickly, before we go, in Biddeford, Maine, an immigration and customs enforcement agent shot and killed a 26-year-old Colombian man, Johann Sebastian Duran Guerrero, on Monday morning. Senator Angus King says Homeland Security Secretary Mullen first told him the man was the target of the warrant agents were executing, then called back to correct it. He was not the target. The Maine Attorney General's office says initial statements suggest the driver was trying to flee in the direction of the agent, and King says he was told the officer opened fire after the man tried to use his vehicle as a weapon. One witness said he heard the man say, "I tried to stop." Duran Guerrero worked as a cleaner and a food delivery driver. He had a partner and a small child. The agent has been placed on leave. There is no video, because the agents were not wearing body cameras. It's the second time in a week that ICE agents have used deadly force, and at least the 9th since the immigration crackdown began. The World Cup is down to the Final Four, and for the first time ever, FIFA's top 4 ranked teams all made the semifinals. France first, Argentina second, Spain third, England fourth. France and Spain met yesterday afternoon at AT&T Stadium in Arlington, Texas. Today it's Argentina against England in Atlanta, and the final is Sunday in East Rutherford, New Jersey. A few numbers on the teams still standing. Kylian Mbappe tops the Golden Boot race with 8 goals, tied with Lionel Messi. France came into the semifinal having outscored opponents 16-2, and Spain arrived on a 36-match unbeaten streak, one shy of tying Italy's record, having conceded exactly one goal across 6 World Cup games. In the hydrogen business, Ballard Power is paying £275 million for the British firm GeoPura, but only $82.5 million of that is cash. The rest is 50.8 million newly issued Ballard shares, which leaves GeoPura's investors holding about 14% of the combined company, much of it subject to lockups after closing. Ballard is pitching this as a transformation into an integrated hydrogen ecosystem provider, moving past fuel cell power modules into production, storage, distribution, and refueling. GeoPura's units have replaced diesel generators at construction sites, film productions, hospitals, and data centers where grid capacity is constrained. Ballard's own share price is already down substantially since the announcement. When a deal is mostly paper, and the paper is falling, that tells you something about what exits look like in hydrogen right now. Prince Harry, Meghan Markle, and their children, Archie, 7, and Lilibet, 5, met with King Charles III and Queen Camilla at Highgrove House on Friday. Buckingham Palace confirmed it. It was the first time Charles, who is 77 and was diagnosed with cancer in 2024, had seen those grandchildren in 4 years. The meeting lasted just over an hour, and the king was reportedly adamant about keeping it private. William did not attend. In fact, the brothers managed to spend the same week in the same country without crossing paths. On July 7th, William was at a school in West London while Harry was at an event 12 miles away. On Friday, William played a charity polo match in Windsor while Harry promoted the Invictus Games in Birmingham, about 115 miles off, a thaw with the father, not with the brother. And finally, Warner Brothers released the first trailer on July 13th for Digger, directed by Alejandro Inarritu, starring Tom Cruise as an oil magnate named Digger Rockwell, whose company project could trigger an $18 trillion disaster. The film follows Rockwell on a mission to prove he is humanity's hero before the catastrophe he unleashed destroys everything. Cruise is 64, and he is nearly unrecognizable. Gray hair, a paunch, a thick southern accent. The cast includes Jesse Plemons, Sandra Huller, Riz Ahmed, and John Goodman as the President of the United States. Inarritu approached Cruise about this project 7 years ago. Cruise told him it took 40 years to be able to play the character. It's his first film outside the Top Gun or Mission Impossible franchises since 2017. A comedy of catastrophic proportions, they're calling it, October 2nd. And that's the news for Wednesday, July 15th. Inflation cooled in June because oil got cheap, and then oil promptly stopped being cheap. The biggest name in online payments got a $53 billion offer from the rival that beat it. And IBM had its worst day since 1987 because its customers spent the money on hardware instead. We'll be watching whether PayPal's board says a word, whether the strait stays shut, and what the FDA turns up in the produce aisle. And thanks, as always, for spending part of your morning with us. Take care of yourselves out there. That was KnowFlo Daily. Sign up for your personalized newsletter at knowflo.io. News picked for you, your local news included, free.